A society's rules and decisions shape the lives of everyone within it. For centuries, people have asked, who should hold the power to make those rules? Democracy offers one answer: government by the people, but its forms are varied and complex. While ancient Athens practiced democracy by letting citizens vote directly on laws, most modern nations have chosen a different path. Representative democracy entrusts the task of decision-making to officials elected by the people, balancing the ideal of popular participation with the practicalities of governing large, diverse societies. This system forms the backbone of many contemporary governments, offering a structure where every voice can, in theory, be heard through chosen representatives. Yet, the workings of representative democracy are not simple. To understand its promise and its pitfalls, we must trace its origins, examine how it functions, and consider how it responds to the needs and challenges of today's world. Democracy, at its core, is the idea that people should have a say in how they are governed. Though this notion may seem simple, it has traveled a long and winding path through history, shaped by diverse cultures, shifting power structures, and the enduring desire for fairness and freedom. To understand the foundations of democracy, especially the form known as representative democracy, we must first look back to the origins of the democratic ideal and then trace how it evolved into the systems most familiar to us today. The word democracy comes from the ancient Greek demokratia, which literally means rule by the people. While ancient Greece, particularly Athens, is often celebrated as the birthplace of democracy, historical evidence shows that forms of collective governance and self-rule appeared independently in various societies around the world. Recent research has revealed that communal decision-making practices were not unique to the Mediterranean. Instead, they emerged wherever people sought to govern themselves and manage shared resources. However, it was in Athens, around 507 before the Common Era under the leadership of Cleisthenes, that democracy as a form of popular rule took on a distinctive shape and lasting influence. Athenian democracy was a system of direct democracy. In this arrangement, eligible citizens, though not all inhabitants, gathered to make decisions on laws and public policy themselves without intermediaries. This was feasible because the number of eligible participants was relatively small and governance was limited to the city-state. Citizens met in assemblies, debated issues openly, and voted directly on matters ranging from military campaigns to public festivals. The underlying principles were clear. Every citizen should have an equal say, and decisions should reflect the will of the majority while still respecting the rights of the minority. This emphasis on equality and participation would remain hallmarks of democratic thought through the centuries. As societies grew larger and more complex, the practicality of direct democracy diminished. The sheer number of citizens, the geographical expanse of nations, and the increasing complexity of governmental affairs made it nearly impossible for everyone to gather and deliberate on every issue. The solution that gradually emerged was representative democracy, a system in which people choose individuals to act on their behalf, making laws and governing the community. In this form, the core democratic principle of rule by the people is preserved, but it is exercised through elected representatives rather than by the entire citizenry directly. Representative democracy is defined by several foundational principles, many of which are recognized by organizations such as the United Nations and enshrined in international law. Central to this system is the concept of popular sovereignty, the idea that government derives its legitimacy from the consent of the governed. Citizens participate in free and fair elections to select their representatives, who are then accountable to those who elected them. Political equality is another pillar. Each citizen's vote carries the same weight, and everyone has the right to participate, regardless of their background. The system is designed to ensure that representatives act in the public interest, with mechanisms in place to hold them accountable for their actions. The transition from direct to representative democracy was neither instantaneous nor universal. Historians note that for much of human history, most societies were governed by monarchs, oligarchs, or small elites with little input from the broader population. However, pressure for greater participation and accountability grew over time, spurred by philosophical movements, social upheaval, and the desire for self-determination. The transformation of democracy from an ancient ideal to a modern system became especially apparent between the mid-18th and mid-19th centuries, when the concept of representative government crystallized in various countries. One of the most influential examples of this shift can be found in the founding of the United States. After breaking away from British colonial rule, a system in which decisions were made by distant monarchs and parliaments, the American colonies crafted a new form of government. The Declaration of Independence, followed by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, established a framework that emphasized representative democracy, checks and balances, and the protection of individual rights. While the new system was imperfect and initially limited participation to a subset of the population, it laid the groundwork for a broader, more inclusive democracy over time. The American model, with its elected legislatures and regular elections, became a powerful example for other nations seeking to balance the need for popular input with the demands of large, complex societies. The distinction between direct and representative democracy is more than a matter of scale or logistics. It reflects different approaches to participation and governance. In direct democracy, citizens vote on laws and policies themselves. In representative democracy, they select individuals to deliberate and decide on their behalf. The United States is often cited as a clear illustration of the representative model. Given the nation's population and geographic spread, it would be virtually impossible for every citizen to gather and debate every issue. Instead, they elect members of Congress, state legislatures, and local councils to represent their interests. These representatives are expected to listen to their constituents, weigh competing interests, and make informed decisions for the common good. Despite these differences, the principles that underpin both direct and representative democracy are largely the same. Participation is central. Democracy cannot function without the active engagement of citizens, whether through voting, running for office, or other forms of civic involvement. Equality remains a core value, ensuring that every person's voice matters. Accountability is essential as well. Elected officials must be answerable to the people, and there must be mechanisms to remove them from office if they fail in their duties. Transparency, political tolerance, and respect for human rights are also recognized as essential features of a healthy democracy. Over time, societies have experimented with ways to enhance participation within representative systems. Some countries incorporate elements of direct democracy, such as referenda or citizen initiatives, allowing the public to vote directly on specific issues. Others encourage participatory democracy, which emphasizes ongoing engagement beyond periodic elections. The rise of participatory methods reflects the enduring belief that democracy thrives when citizens are actively involved, not just at the ballot box, but in everyday civic life. The legal and philosophical foundations of democracy are also echoed in international frameworks. The United Nations, for example, recognizes democracy as a core value rooted in the will of the people and the protection of human rights, as outlined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. These documents underscore the idea that democracy is not just a system of government, but an ongoing commitment to dignity, freedom, and justice for all. In sum, the journey from the assemblies of ancient Athens to the representative systems of today reveals both the adaptability and the enduring appeal of democracy. Whether direct or representative, the foundational principles remain: citizen participation, equality, accountability, and respect for human rights. Representative democracy, in particular, offers a practical means for large, diverse societies to ensure that government remains rooted in the consent of the governed. As we continue to explore the workings of representative systems, these foundational ideas serve as both a guide and an inspiration, reminding us that democracy, in all its forms, ultimately belongs to the people. The workings of representative democracy can often seem intricate, yet at its heart, the system relies on mechanisms that empower ordinary citizens to shape the direction of their government. Representative democracy thrives on a careful balance of institutions, rules, and relationships, all designed to translate the collective will of the people into action. The most immediate connection between citizens and their government is through elections, but the process extends far beyond the ballot box. Institutions, large and small, elected officials in various roles, and the very structure of electoral systems all influence how voices are heard and how decisions are made. At its core, representative democracy is defined by political pluralism and open competition. Instead of a single viewpoint dominating public life, multiple parties and perspectives are encouraged to compete for influence. This pluralism is not just a feature but a safeguard, ensuring that no single group can easily monopolize power. Open competition among parties and candidates gives citizens real choices, anchoring the legitimacy of those ultimately elected. Popular consent, expressed through regular and meaningful elections, remains the foundation of the system and explains representative democracy's widespread adoption in large, complex societies. The institutions that channel this competition are diverse, reflecting the variety and scale of the societies they serve. In the United States, for example, 3 broad levels of government, federal, state, and local, each have their own elected officials, whose responsibilities differ according to the scope of their office. At the national level, Members of Congress bear the significant responsibilities of crafting legislation, representing their constituents' interests, overseeing the executive branch, and providing services to those they serve. Their days may be filled with policy details, spirited debates, and the quieter but vital work of constituent service. This relationship between representative and constituent, though sometimes tested by distance or ideology, lies at the heart of the democratic process. State-level officials such as governors and legislators share many of these responsibilities, but their focus is on issues closer to home education, transportation, healthcare, and public safety. Their decisions can have immediate and tangible effects on citizens' daily lives. At the local level, government leaders such as city council members or county commissioners play an even more direct role in shaping community life. They pass ordinances, manage budgets, and work closely with citizens to address pressing concerns. Local government is often where policymaking is most accessible and where citizen involvement can be most direct and impactful. The distinction between elected and appointed officials is another key feature of representative democracy. Elected officials derive their authority directly from the people. They are answerable to voters and can be removed from office through elections. Appointed officials, meanwhile, are selected by those in elected office and often serve in specialized or administrative roles. While both play important parts, the direct accountability of elected officials is a cornerstone of representative democracy, fostering a sense of public ownership and engagement. The way representatives are chosen, the electoral system also profoundly shapes the nature of representation. Electoral systems are the rules that convert votes into seats, determining who gets to participate in decision-making. The most familiar system in the United States and several other countries is the plurality or first-past-the-post method. Under this system, the candidate who receives the most votes in a district wins, even if they do not have a majority. This approach tends to favor larger parties and can sometimes leave minority perspectives underrepresented, but it also produces clear winners and stable governments. Majoritarian systems, closely related to plurality, often require a candidate to secure a majority of votes, sometimes through a runoff if no one achieves an outright majority in the first round. These systems emphasize broad support for elected officials, but like plurality systems, they may limit the number of smaller parties that gain representation. In contrast, proportional representation systems aim to match the percentage of seats a party receives with its share of the vote. Instead of winner-take-all contests in single districts, parties present lists of candidates and voters choose among parties. Seats are then allocated according to the overall vote totals. This system allows for greater diversity in legislative bodies, giving smaller parties and minority groups a better chance of being heard. Proportional systems can encourage coalition governments, where multiple parties must work together to form a majority, often resulting in more negotiation and compromise. Some countries and jurisdictions use mixed electoral systems, combining elements of both plurality or majoritarian and proportional representation. These hybrid approaches seek to balance the clarity and stability of winner-take-all systems with the inclusiveness of proportional methods. The choice of electoral system has a significant impact on participation, representation, and even the shape of political competition. For example, the drawing of electoral districts, sometimes manipulated in a process known as gerrymandering, can affect the fairness and effectiveness of representation, particularly in winner-take-all systems. The process of electing representatives is itself carefully structured. In the United States, for instance, members of the House of Representatives are elected from single-member districts through a plurality rule, meaning the candidate with the most votes wins the seat. Districts are periodically redrawn to reflect changes in population, an exercise intended to preserve the principle of one person, one vote, though it can also be a source of political contention. Representative elections in other contexts, such as professional associations or large organizations, may follow similar procedures: nominations, campaigns, and voting, though the stakes and scale may differ. Beyond the mechanics of voting, accountability mechanisms are essential to the health of representative democracy. Elections are the most visible of these, allowing citizens to reward or punish officials for their performance. But accountability also operates through legal frameworks, oversight committees, transparency requirements, and the ongoing scrutiny of a free press. These mechanisms ensure that representatives do not simply act on their own preferences but remain answerable to those they serve. Accountability is not just a matter of discipline. It is vital for public trust and the legitimacy of the system. When citizens believe their representatives can be held to account, they are more likely to participate and to accept the outcomes of the democratic process. Reforms to strengthen accountability and representation are a constant feature of representative democracies. Changes to electoral systems, transparency laws, and oversight mechanisms are often debated and sometimes implemented in response to public demand for more effective governance. At the local level in particular, the design of electoral systems can have profound implications for inclusivity and fairness. Well-designed systems can make local institutions more responsive and accessible, while poorly designed ones can entrench existing power structures and limit meaningful participation. Ongoing experiments within representative democracy seek to bridge the gap between citizens and their representatives. Some approaches incorporate more direct forms of citizen input, such as deliberative assemblies or participatory budgeting, within the representative framework. These efforts reflect a broader recognition that representation is not static, it evolves in response to new challenges and opportunities. In sum, the mechanics of representative democracy are shaped by a tapestry of institutions, rules, and relationships. From the design of electoral systems to the everyday work of elected officials, from the safeguards of accountability to the persistent push for reform, each element contributes to a system that strives to make government both responsive and responsible. For citizens, understanding these mechanics is itself a form of empowerment. A reminder that, while representative democracy is complex, its purpose is simple: to ensure that government remains, in both spirit and practice, an expression of the people's will. In the bustling complexity of modern societies, representative democracy stands as a system both widely admired and frequently scrutinized. Its strengths are celebrated by scholars and citizens alike, yet its limitations remain the subject of ongoing debate. At its best, representative democracy provides a practical way for large, diverse populations to govern themselves, drawing legitimacy from the participation and consent of millions who cannot all gather in a single forum. Yet beneath its surface, questions persist about whose voices are truly heard, how faithfully officials serve their constituents, and whether the system can keep pace with evolving expectations and challenges. One of the foundational strengths of representative democracy is its practicality. In a world where the number of citizens often reaches into the millions, direct participation on every issue becomes nearly impossible. Electing representatives to deliberate and make decisions on behalf of the public enables societies to function efficiently without sacrificing the core democratic principle that government authority originates with the people. This arrangement brings a measure of stability, as elected officials are typically chosen for set terms, providing continuity and predictability in governance. Regular elections also create a rhythm of accountability, compelling those in power to remain attentive to public sentiment or risk being replaced at the next opportunity. Beyond practicality, representative democracy offers the advantage of expertise. In theory, representatives are chosen for their knowledge, experience, or commitment to public service. Compared to systems where every citizen must weigh in on every decision, this allows for more informed, nuanced deliberation, especially on complex issues that demand specialized understanding. The process of debate and compromise among representatives often results in policies that are more balanced and carefully considered than those that might emerge from the heat of mass opinion. Critics of direct democracy have noted that the representative model enables a more thoughtful and layered expression of public priorities, filtering passions through deliberation and negotiation. Inclusiveness is another central promise of representative democracy. When functioning well, it extends the political process to a broad spectrum of society, striving to ensure that various groups across lines of ethnicity, gender, religion, and class find their interests reflected in public life. Research shows that greater diversity among elected officials leads not only to more inclusive policies, but also to a heightened sense of political efficacy among underrepresented communities. When people see someone like themselves in positions of authority, they are more likely to believe that government is responsive to their needs. This diversity is not just a matter of fairness, it contributes directly to the legitimacy and vibrancy of democracy itself. However, the underrepresentation of minorities and women remains a persistent issue in many legislatures worldwide. Despite these strengths, representative democracy faces significant challenges. One of the most persistent criticisms is that it can drift toward elitism, concentrating decision-making in the hands of a relatively small group. Even in systems designed to be open and accountable, representatives may not always reflect the full spectrum of public opinion or lived experience. The underrepresentation of minorities and women remains a particularly stubborn problem, with many legislatures around the world failing to mirror the diversity of the populations they serve. As surveys by organizations like the Pew Research Center reveal, while representative democracy remains broadly popular, many citizens express dissatisfaction with the degree to which their governments actually represent them, calling for more inclusive and responsive institutions. Low voter participation further complicates questions of legitimacy. When significant portions of the electorate abstain from voting, doubts arise about whether elected bodies genuinely reflect the will of the people. Scholars have linked severely depressed voter turnout to weakened democratic legitimacy, suggesting that governments elected by a minority of eligible voters may struggle to claim the full authority of the public trust. The reasons for low turnout are varied, ranging from apathy and disillusionment to practical barriers such as restrictive voting laws or inconvenient polling locations. But the consequences are clear. The less engaged the citizenry, the more tenuous the claim of government by consent. Another challenge comes from the influence of special interests. While representative democracy is designed to aggregate the preferences of the many, it can be vulnerable to the outsized sway of organized groups that possess resources, information, or access unavailable to the average citizen. Interest groups, by their nature, seek to promote specific causes or agendas, and their presence in democratic systems is both inevitable and, at times, beneficial. Research suggests that interest groups can enhance representation by spotlighting issues that might otherwise be neglected and by providing expertise to lawmakers. They also shape public opinion, not so much by virtue of their status or name recognition, but through the strength and persuasiveness of their arguments. However, the balance is delicate. There is an inherent risk that representatives, lacking perfect information about the preferences of their constituents, may rely too heavily on the cues and advocacy of organized interests. This can create an asymmetry where the interests of well-organized minorities are heard more clearly and acted upon more decisively than those of the broader public. The result can be policies that diverge from majority preferences, undermining the ideal of government as an authentic expression of the people's will. Critics warn that, in some cases, the system becomes more responsive to donors, lobbyists, or vocal activists than to ordinary voters, fueling perceptions of a democracy captured by elites. Accountability, so central to the promise of representative democracy, also encounters obstacles in practice. While the electoral process theoretically empowers citizens to reward or punish officials for their performance, several barriers can weaken this mechanism. Corruption, opaque governance, and weak institutions may shield representatives from meaningful scrutiny. Even when legal frameworks for transparency and oversight exist, their effectiveness depends on the vigilance of the press, the independence of the judiciary, and the engagement of the public. In some environments, accountability is further weakened by a lack of meaningful alternatives at the ballot box, or by institutional arrangements that make it difficult to remove poorly performing leaders. The structure of electoral systems themselves can introduce additional challenges. For example, proportional representation is often praised for its inclusiveness and its ability to translate votes into seats more fairly, but it has faced criticism for potentially encouraging political fragmentation and instability. In some cases, the need to form coalition governments can lead to gridlock or make it difficult to assign clear responsibility for policy outcomes. While such systems can broaden the range of voices in the legislature, they may also complicate efforts to hold any single party or leader accountable for the direction of government. Amid these challenges, it is important to remember that representative democracy, while imperfect, remains preferable to autocratic alternatives. Its core principles, accountability, pluralism, and the peaceful transfer of power provide a framework that can be adapted and improved over time. Scholars and reformers continue to debate ways to modernize democratic institutions, whether by increasing diversity among representatives, lowering barriers to participation, or enhancing the transparency and responsiveness of government. Historical debates reflected in past party platforms and political movements reveal that the struggle to perfect representative democracy is as old as the system itself. Disputes over popular sovereignty, the scope and limits of representation, and the proper relationship between government and governed has shaped the trajectory of democracies around the world. The ongoing process of reform and adaptation speaks to both the resilience and the unfinished business of representative systems. In sum, representative democracy's enduring appeal lies in its ability to balance the competing demands of efficiency, expertise, inclusiveness, and accountability. Its greatest strengths are rooted in its responsiveness to the will of the people and its capacity to evolve in response to criticism and new challenges. Yet its limitations, whether in the form of unequal representation, disengaged electorates, or the influence of special interests, remind us that democracy is not a finished project. It is a living system, one that requires vigilance, participation, and a constant commitment to the ideals that inspired its creation. Across the globe today, representative democracy takes many forms, each shaped by a country's unique history, culture, and contemporary pressures. The concept of citizens choosing individuals to act on their behalf is no longer new, but the ways in which representative democracy is practiced and reimagined continue to evolve in response to an ever-changing world. In the 21st century, this evolution is evident not only in the structures of parliaments and the rhythms of elections, but also in the ways technology, globalization, and shifting civic expectations are reshaping both the promise and the practice of democratic representation. Recent global trends, as reported in the 2024 Democracy Index produced by the Economist Intelligence Unit, reveal a world in flux. On one hand, the index notes a general decline in democratic scores and the rise of more authoritarian regimes. Yet, this is not the whole story. Some regions have seen notable improvements, particularly in political participation. Gains have been especially significant in certain African and European countries, where citizens have pushed for greater representation and, in some cases, achieved reforms that have strengthened their democracies. According to the latest data, nations such as Botswana and Moldova have recorded some of the largest recent increases in representative democracy, highlighting the dynamic nature of political development. The Democracy Index, widely cited for its comprehensive methodology, assesses countries based on several factors: electoral pluralism, civil liberties, political participation, and the effective functioning of government. By examining these elements, the index provides a broad snapshot of how representative democracy is faring in practice. The 2024 report's global rankings stretch back to 1975, offering perspective on how democracy has waxed and waned over decades. The most recent findings confirm that, despite setbacks in some areas, the concept of representative government remains deeply embedded in many societies, with citizens often mobilizing to defend or expand their democratic rights. Looking more closely at country-level performance, the Global State of Democracy Report for 2024 offers a nuanced view of representation. It measures not only political rights and participation, but also the rule of law and the quality of governance. The picture that emerges is one of significant diversity. Some countries consistently score at the top, reflecting strong traditions of representation and accountability. Others lag behind, revealing the unevenness that persists in the global democratic landscape. These variations are not merely academic. They have real consequences for how governments respond to their citizens and how citizens, in turn, perceive the legitimacy of their political institutions. Beyond these broad patterns, the mechanisms of representative democracy are adapting in remarkable ways to modern challenges. Technology, for example, is changing how citizens engage with their representatives and with each other. In Estonia and Switzerland, digital voting systems allow citizens to cast ballots electronically, offering greater convenience and, in some cases, increasing participation. In cities around the world, participatory budgeting platforms invite ordinary people to help decide how public funds are spent, fostering a more direct connection between government and governed. These innovations have enabled citizens to participate in the democratic process beyond traditional polling places or set election days. Yet, the influence of technology is not entirely positive. Experts caution that the growing reliance on digital tools risks leaving some groups behind. Concerns have been raised that marginalized communities, those with limited access to technology or lower digital literacy, may find it harder to participate fully in online voting or civic engagement platforms. This digital divide introduces a new challenge for representative democracy: how to harness the benefits of technological innovation without exacerbating existing inequalities or creating new barriers to participation. The conversation about technology and democracy extends beyond voting or budgeting tools. Artificial intelligence and digital communication are also transforming the relationship between citizens and their elected officials. Some governments are experimenting with artificial intelligence-driven analysis to better understand public opinion or to streamline bureaucratic processes. While these efforts can make government more responsive, they also raise important questions about privacy, accountability, and the responsible use of data. Advocates for democratic reform argue that if technology is to strengthen representation, it must be deployed with care, ensuring transparency, protecting civil liberties, and guarding against manipulation or misuse. Alongside technological change, globalization is another force reshaping representative democracies worldwide. The increasing interconnectedness of economies, cultures, and communications has brought both opportunities and dilemmas for self-government. On one hand, globalization can weaken national borders and challenge traditional notions of sovereignty, making it more difficult for elected representatives to respond solely to the needs and preferences of their own constituents. Policies made in one country now often reverberate far beyond its borders, complicating the work of national parliaments and sometimes fueling a sense of disconnection among citizens. For developing democracies, globalization presents a double-edged sword. It can foster economic growth and open new channels for international cooperation, but it can also strain the capacity of states to represent their people effectively. When decisions are increasingly made at supranational institutions or shaped by global markets, local voices may struggle to be heard. Some scholars argue that this new reality may require greater state control or new forms of representation, both at national and international levels. These adjustments, however, are not without controversy, as they can provoke debates about democratic legitimacy and the risk of further distancing citizens from the centers of power. Economic globalization also brings questions about inequality and representation to the forefront. As global markets expand, the benefits are not always distributed evenly. In some democracies, this has fueled discontent and a sense that government is more responsive to multinational corporations or financial elites than to ordinary voters. The challenge for representative democracy, then, is to adapt its institutions to a world where economic and political boundaries are increasingly porous without sacrificing the core principle of government by the people. Within this context, debates about the future of representative democracy have intensified. Observers warn that the rise of populism, coupled with technological and global shifts, has exposed the fragility of representative institutions. In the European Union, for example, unequal representation remains a source of tension, as some populations feel that their interests are not adequately reflected in the decisions made by supranational bodies. In the United States, recent analyses highlight a decline in democratic quality, attributed to factors such as partisan polarization, declining trust in institutions, and a growing influence of special interests. Despite these challenges, many democracies are experimenting with new ways to strengthen the bond between citizens and their representatives. Civic deliberation, where ordinary people engage in structured discussions about public policy, has shown promise in building consensus and legitimacy. When citizens are actively involved in shaping decisions, research suggests they are more likely to trust both the process and the outcomes. Governments and civil society organizations are also exploring novel forms of engagement, from digital town halls to citizen assemblies, in the hope of making representative democracy more responsive and inclusive. At the same time, calls for greater transparency, accountability, and innovation are growing louder. The decline in public trust and the perception that special interests wield disproportionate power have prompted reformers to advocate for mechanisms that give citizens more direct input and hold officials to higher standards. These efforts reflect a broader recognition that representative democracy cannot be static. It must continually adapt to new realities and rising expectations. Ultimately, the story of representative democracy in the modern world is one of resilience, experimentation, and ongoing struggle. Across continents, citizens and governments alike are searching for ways to make representation more meaningful in the face of new technologies, global interdependence, and the complexities of 21st century life. While the future remains uncertain, the commitment to the core ideals of representation, participation, and accountability endures, shaping the ongoing evolution of democracy in our time.